Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the big games from this past weekend. Ohio State ends the drought in the game. Alabama escapes the Iron Bowl as they often do over there in Jordan-Hare. You got Texas upsetting A&M, not changing too much about the playoff bracket as far as I'm concerned. And Miami and Vanderbilt just trying to get style points and find their way into that 12-team field. But we got to talk about the rest of it. There was a lot of other games that we got to talk about that have some massive implications. And we'll start down here, about 15 minutes up the road from me. Georgia gets a win 16-9 over Georgia Tech. This game was a little bit weird. It was definitely not what a lot of people, including myself, were expecting in this football game. I thought we were going to get an offensive battle. I thought Buster Faulkner was going to be able to do enough to find openings in the Georgia defense. I thought the Georgia offense was going to be able to essentially run all over Georgia Tech, and they did some of that in this football game, but real credit to Blake Giddy and that Georgia Tech defense. They did an incredible job preparing for this group. They tackled incredibly well. E.J. Lightsey played an incredible game against his former team over there at Georgia. Just really, really incredible job from all of that group, but at the end of the day, Nate Frazier and Zachariah Branch, a couple of really, really special players, led Georgia to the finish line here. I have some questions about Gunnar Stockton moving forward. This was maybe his worst game. Definitely his worst game in the last month or so. We'll see what happens with him. I have enough faith in him to bounce back and be fine on Saturday, but definitely some things with this past game that leave a couple more questions. But with A&M's loss, Georgia finds their way back to the SEC title for the 5th time in a row. Insanity. And they get Alabama. You can never escape the inevitable over there in the SEC. Ole Miss handled the Egg Bowl 38-19. A lot of questions about how this team was going to react, all the lane talk, all of that stuff. There was way more drama off the field than there was on it. They handled business very comfortably in this game. There wasn't much of a question about who was winning it from the start to the finish. It was very, very decisive in a lot of ways. Frankly, the craziest part of this entire game happened after the game with what people are calling Hogate, if you will, with that reporter using an unsavory lyric to describe the circumstances around Lane Kiffin. Weird. Just a really weird circumstance. It only happens in college football. That is what this sport is. It is weird. It doesn't make any sense. That one made as little sense as I could possibly imagine. But at the end of the day, I guess you're reporting on Pete Golding now. Hopefully he feels okay about that quote. Hopefully you don't use that quote towards him in a couple of years. But at the end of the day, Ole Miss wins this one. I think they're in the CFP no matter what. Another thing that we will touch on tomorrow, I promise you, but I don't think there's much of a question. I think if you got to see them play without Lane Kiffin in the offensive staff and it looked terrible, then maybe you have a conversation there, but you're not going to be able to. So I think they're in there. Do they get a home playoff game? I think is the debate there, and I think there's validity to both sides there. So we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. I'll give my full take, but Ole Miss is in the playoff one way or another regardless to me. Oregon gets a 26-14 win over Washington. They kind of handled their business here. There wasn't much of a question of what was going to happen in this game. It got close there for a second, and then Malik Benson ran like 100 miles an hour. I don't know how he defied 5 or 6 angles in that moment, but he did. It was absolutely incredible to watch. The acceleration on that kid is out of this world. Came over from Alabama a couple of years ago, and without DeCorian Moore, without Evan Stewart, without Gary Bryant Jr., he stepped up in a big moment, made a massive play. They score a touchdown. They put this game fully away. Oregon's in there, and they are dangerous as can be. I was worried about this Oregon team coming into the year. If you had told me they were going to be this, I would have told you were crazy. If you told me they were going to survive injuries on the offensive line, they were going to survive injuries at the wide receiver position, I was going to call you crazy. I'll be totally honest. But they've done that. There is not a team that wants to see Oregon in the CFP, especially if DeCorian Moore comes back, especially if Evan Stewart comes back, because I think people forget just how special of a player that is, and especially if they're fully healthy on the offensive line, which they should be in that home playoff game. It's a scary team, and it's definitely a team that can find their way to the semifinals, maybe even the national title, and maybe get a little bit of revenge on Ohio State from a year ago. But at the end of the day, that's way in the future, a very dangerous Oregon team going into the CFP no matter what. Texas Tech and BYU handled their business. There was a moment where UCF had a little bit of life. That was taken away very, very quickly. But Texas Tech tops West Virginia 49-0. This was a formality, if I'm being totally honest. Even if Texas Tech didn't have the Big 12 title locked up, which they did by the end of this game, they were going to win this game by a lot regardless. And that's exactly what they did. We will talk about my picks for all of these games as they come up. We'll talk about what the games are here in a second. But they rolled. They were going to roll. There wasn't much of a question there. So BYU tops UCF 41-21. Fell down 14-0 in this game. So there was a moment where everyone's ears perked up and thought maybe we get a little bit of craziness. Now, they could have lost the game and still been on their way to Arlington, but that would have taken the CFP at-large bid totally out of the conversation. Another thing that we'll talk about tomorrow with the CFP, because there's plenty of conversation about that. I pretty much have my CFP set in stone, but we'll talk about that later. Virginia Tech just gets rolled by Virginia, just totally handled. Cavaliers just totally handled this game from start to finish. Jamari Taylor's an incredible running back that doesn't get nearly enough respect, but the defense stepped up massive in this game against an offense that you knew was going to run the football. They didn't let him run the football from start to finish. An incredible job by Virginia. You come into a weekend where you know you pretty much have to win to find your way to the ACC title with the logjam that was right behind them. They find a way to win and do it convincingly. And then SMU. SMU falls to Cal 38-35, something that I hate to say, but I saw coming in this weekend. This was the JKS show, and SMU just couldn't overcome it. It was going to happen to a number of teams this year. It happened to a couple of teams a couple of weeks ago when JKS played him. He's an incredible player. He's an incredible young player. A lot of people talking about where he's going to play next. I think you're going to find out he really likes Cal. And I think if they hire Tosh Lupo here pretty soon, which I expect them to do, I don't know if he's going anywhere. We'll talk about that in time, obviously. Plenty of time to talk about the portal. Not right now, that's for sure. But they knocked out SMU from the ACC title. I'm not sure SMU deserved to go to the ACC title, but I know for a fact that the team that I'm about to talk about probably doesn't deserve to be there, but they're there nonetheless. Duke, how? How'd you pull this one off? It is the weirdest team that I have ever laid my eyes on, maybe since I've started watching college football. They're going to the ACC title. They're a 7-5 football team, and they're going to the ACC title. And the weirdest part about it is they lost to another 6-2 team in Georgia Tech. It's just a really weird system that we got going on where Georgia Tech lost to Pitt, who's also 6-2. It became a logjam, and Duke finds their way out of it. I don't know how. I want to say something right now that I won't get in, or well, I'll get into tomorrow, but I'm going to say it right now. They should have no chance to get to the CFP. Plain and simple. There's no shot. I don't care what Duke does this weekend. They should not be in the CFP. You can't lose to UConn. You can't get rolled by Illinois. You can't lose to teams within your conference that are not playing in the ACC Championship and expect to go to the CFP. If they make it, I will lose my mind. I really do mean that. All due respect to Manny Diaz and this group. They've done a great job. They deserve to go there. Anyone saying they should put Miami in because they like Miami more, give me a break. Duke deserves to be there, but they do not deserve to go to the CFP if they win this football game. We'll see what happens. Obviously going to be a very interesting one, but this Duke team is going to find a way to play in the ACC title, and if they do win and if they somehow go to the CFP, that'll be a 5-loss team lining up to play in the CFP. Not what people expected. I don't think what Duke fans expected after they took that loss to UConn, but here we are. At the end of it all, Duke finds their way to the ACC title. Over in the group of 6, Tulane handled business against Charlotte, punched their ticket to the American title, where they will face off against North Texas, who handled their business this past weekend. No real drama there. They went about their business, and those will be the two that will be facing off. Navy did get a massive win over Memphis, but didn't end up making a difference there. JMU dominates Coastal Carolina, gets a couple more style points, but got to beat Troy this upcoming weekend. Troy tops Southern Miss 28-18. Massive one there. If JMU wins that football game and Duke wins, I think they're firmly in. I think JMU should probably be in regardless, but again, discussion for another day. Jacksonville State top Western Kentucky, which means it's going to be Jacksonville State, Kennesaw State in that Conference USA matchup. Really fun one over there. And New Mexico beat San Diego State and threw the entire Mountain West into a blender. I'll show you what they came out with here in a second. It's neither of those football teams. But Washington State also handles Oregon State. Just cut that trophy right down the middle over there in the Pac-2, and we'll see what happens. We'll let those two just have half a trophy for the rest of time. Very weird season for those two teams, but you've come to an end, and you got some teams joining you here pretty soon. But the conference championships that we get to get into tomorrow. We'll talk about the schedule here in a second, but these are the conference championships we got coming up. SEC, it's Alabama, Georgia. Imagine that. It's going to be Alabama, Georgia at the end of this thing in the SEC over there in Atlanta, about 10 minutes down the road from me. Big Ten, the collision course. Ohio State versus Indiana. Cannot wait for that game to unfold. Going to be an incredible one. Big 12, again, kind of a collision course for much of the season. Texas Tech versus BYU. Both teams still on the table. If they lose this game to get into the CFP, we'll talk about it tomorrow. ACC, Virginia versus Duke. If you had that picked in the preseason, bless you. I don't know how you did that, but you found a way to pick the weirdest conference that I've seen in a very long time. You picked the right two. I can't imagine there are many people out there that did that. I don't know if there is one that picked that. Over there in the group of five, the American, it's going to be North Texas at Tulane. A lot of these are home games for the higher ranked teams, so something to keep in mind there. Troy is actually at JMU, so apologies for that. Troy will play over there in Harrisonburg. Great game over there in the Sun Belt. Will have a lot to do with what the CFP looks like. Mountain West, UNLV at Boise State. So New Mexico and San Diego State get boxed out. I don't know how they go about their business. I would have loved to see Jason Eck in this football game. But at the end of the day, UNLV will play Boise State in that one. Over in the Conference USA, Kennesaw State with Jerry Mack doing an incredible job in his very first year. They're going to play against Jacksonville State. Over there in Jacksonville, it's going to be an incredible, Jacksonville, Alabama. It's going to be an incredible matchup over there. And then the MAC, this is the one that gets the neutral site over there in Ford Field up there in Detroit. Miami of Ohio against Western Kentucky. That's entirely wrong. Western Michigan in the MAC. I totally apologize. Western Michigan is going to play Miami of Ohio over there in Detroit at the end of this weekend for the MAC championship, a special conference. There's no doubt about that every single year. The MAC is a really, really fun one. This one was no different, and it'll be Miami of Ohio against Western Michigan for that championship at the end of it all. But it was an incredible weekend. It's one of those weekends that everyone, as we've gotten further on into this college football expansion, the playoff, and all of that stuff, people have kind of tried to dampen down this weekend. They've tried to tell you that it doesn't matter, and yes, the Texas A&M result is likely not going to change what the CFP looks like in terms of the teams inside of it. Those guys cared. There's no doubt about that. The guys over there in Ann Arbor, Michigan, they cared about where their feet were. They didn't care about what the CFP implications were. They didn't care about all that stuff. All that stuff obviously matters to these kids. But a little bit of hate matters too. And I promise you, that was on full display this past weekend. We got a couple of brawls. We got a Michigan player headbutting a ref, which he was very lucky to stay in that football game. We got rivalry weekend. And I think a lot of times we have to remind ourselves that when they get in between those white lines, those guys are competitors, and they're going to get after each other, and there's a little bit of hate late in the season that with the playoff, with all of that stuff, even that with all that baked in, it's still going to be downright special. And it was special this past weekend. I'm sure it'll be special next year and going forward regardless of what the postseason looks like. Just feel like we have to remind people of that every now and then because you get a little bit down in the dumps about where this sport is. If you watched Saturday and came away saying it doesn't matter to those players, I don't know what to tell you. It absolutely does, and that was on full display this past Saturday. But thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. So we're going to do the same thing we did last week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm going out of town Thursday. I'm going up to Washington, D.C. to hang out with some friends. So I will be doing tomorrow, doing all my picks. On Wednesday, reacting to the college football playoff rankings, kind of doing a couple of predictions myself, maybe predicting the playoff at the end of this weekend. All of that good stuff will be coming the next couple of days. But we got a show coming for you tomorrow where we'll pick all of the conference championship games. We'll get into all the hypotheticals as we head into the conference or the CFP rankings. all of that stuff coming for you tomorrow. And then we'll close out the weekend with a myriad of different stuff on Wednesday, but just wanted to make sure everyone knew. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next show. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the absolute world to me. Feel like we're having quite a bit of fun over here, so please do join us. It's an incredible time, man. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that great stuff, and thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you guys tomorrow for some championship picks.